some people have to put them into a pigeonhole. They have to have a reason. And it can be alien abduction, it can be seeing a ghost, it can be anything. It gets labelled. Humans hate having something floating around unexplained, so we have to give an explanation. Now, I don't know the background history to that particular case, and it really does take a lot of detailed investigation to try and get any further. But I would say with all these cases, a phenomena happens. We don't disbelieve that something happened to them, but everybody puts their own interpretation. Now, I can give you a very simple example of how good witnesses are. We used to run some evening classes when we got the time on paranormal studies, and one evening was devoted to observation. And we'd actually have a cameraman, a colleague of mine, who would wander around for the first evening. Second evening, he'd actually come up and start taking some pictures and change the film in front of me. One time, we actually went full length and had a good two-minute heated debate, and he stormed out of the room. The whole class was looking at us horrified, and I said, right, it's all stage managed, describe him, you've got a pen and paper in front of you. Oh, right. And they wrote down a description, and his height ranged from about 5'3" to 6'2". Sure. Beard, no beard, balding, not balding, smart trainers, shoes, jeans, the lot. I actually described him as Simon the cameraman, and only one person out of 30 remembered he had a camera around his neck and was holding a camera. I asked them to draw a line underneath and then describe the badge he was wearing and the case he was holding. Half couldn't remember it, but the other half gave very vivid descriptions. Most of them differed. Some were very similar. That was quite interesting because he wasn't wearing a badge and he didn't have a case. So, if you ask someone for a description of something and they hadn't seen it, they will still give you a description because they feel they have to.
You ask any policeman, the poor souls, I mean, they ask for a description and they ask over and over and over again because they actually have to, without putting what they want the person to have seen into their minds, people really do not observe.
No.
But I do feel that if something suddenly catches your eye, something as extraordinary as a flying saucer or a whatever, I do feel that you sort of notice it. I've never noticed one. I've never seen one.
In a moment, I'm going to be talking to somebody who believes she's gone through an experience similar to the one that you related, Jeremy, in the woman in Hastings. First of all, let's just hit the phones before we go to a break. Donna's in London. Donna, good morning. You're on Talk Radio UK.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, I do believe there are aliens. I don't really see how anyone can't believe there are. The universe is so vast. There are that many stars. I mean, we can see the stars, but we can't see the planets around them, let alone see if there's life on them planets.
There are a billion other galaxies, aren't there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree that there could be other life forms in other planets. NASA's been doing searches for years. A lot of money's been put into trying to contact. We even put little epitaphs and little drawings on the side of our spaceships in case they happen to bump into someone. So, a lot of money's spent assuming that there might be life out there, and I don't think anyone would disagree with it. In a research organisation, you're trying to get evidence that they've actually come to Earth. You're trying to uncover evidence that they do keep coming all the way here and then crashing in the last 20 feet. There's so many crash retrieval stories. There's very little actual physical evidence that ever comes to light.
Careless aliens.
Careless aliens, yes. They seem to get all the way here and then celebrate too quickly. So.
But I mean, when you hear highly trained jet fighter pilots describing, I mean, there you are, 60,000 feet up, you're on your own, you're travelling at quite a substantial speed, and you are pretty aware of the fact that you're probably the only person up there apart from maybe a Concorde or whatever, but because you keep away from those routes and so forth, when you suddenly find somebody with you, and I'm not talking about some of the silly tabloid stories they've done, like Kenneth Williams tapping on the cockpit or whatever, but there is suddenly something up there. Something shows on the radar and is available later because it's all recorded in the black box or the yellow helmet or whatever it is. Then you begin to think. I mean, I like you, have a very open mind. I just think that, as Donna just said, the universe is so enormous. There could well be something up there.
I have seen a UFO, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. Paul's in Liverpool. Paul, morning. You're on Talk Radio.
Good morning.
Hello.
Yes, my story is I was with my son visiting a relative on a New Year's Eve, well over 10 years ago, and I'm not one who actually believed in flying saucers, but I left the car at home and I was getting a late bus back to Liverpool.
Having a drink while you were drunk?
No, I didn't have a drink.
Right. No, because that affects you.
I can assure you we didn't have a drink. I was expecting the bus to go into Liverpool, but unfortunately it only went halfway on East Lancashire Road by a famous factory, East Electric. The bus driver informed us that across the road on housing estate we could connect the bus there, which would be the last one going into Liverpool. I'm standing at the bus stop with my son. There was a couple of elderly people, a couple of young people, and I was talking to a particular chap, just talking about where he was going for the night. We had our backs facing the city, looking towards Manchester, and right in front of us, about 500 yards away, was a block of flats. Now, all of a sudden, we all was looking around us. We could hear this terrible droning sound, like heavy engines, but it was a real heavy droning sound. And as we looked up in the field of view, which apparently looked the height off the block of flats, which was about 14 floors, partly sticking out one side was about 70 foot long, and we could see the tail end of it, the other end of the flats. Now, there's only one single block. Now, it was octagon shape, octagon, shape.
Octagonal.
Yeah.
Right.
We just say a rough estimate, about over 200 foot long. It had no lights, no engines, no force of, the way it could travel. It had no wings, it had no hanging battery. We thought it could have been a balloon or something. The first thing come to mind was frightening, because we thought it was like one of these ballistic missiles you see on the May Day parade in Russia. And it seemed to creep up at a slow speed to where we first observed it. Then all of a sudden it picked up speed, and in a flash it'd gone out of sight completely. That was it, basically. Now, I looked in the papers, I looked, listened to the news, nothing was said. But 2 weeks after, people started coming forward, and apparently it was spotted from Preston and McGull, which is the flight path which we would have seen cutting across the East Lancashire Road. It was seen in Warrington, and then the last time it was seen was Newcastle-under-Lyme.
Well, when it speeded up, did the droning noise sort of speed up? You know how an engine sort of...
No, it went off silent. It just went like a flash. But it was so vivid. I'm talking about looking at an object about 100 yards away. It was so massive. It was too, it had no sign. What was so frightening about it? It had no wings. It was dark colour, like a blacky, greeny colour. That would be just like probably the shading of the night. It was about 8 o'clock, 8:30 at night.
Yeah, I don't know of this particular case, and I haven't heard any reports on it. But I'm sure before we'll be interested in this. I can't really relate to that one, but I can relate to one that was brought to our attention at the conference by two of the Russian delegates that were flown over, and one of those was, I'll try and pronounce it right, it's the Petrovska phenomena, which was a Russian town. They had reports of like a huge jellyfish shape that came over the town. Hundreds of people saw it, and they traced most of the witnesses. They all had drawings which were very similar, and it was a huge shape which they all said they gave distances and everything. What happened was the Soviets became very interested, and they got some of their scientists to look into this, and Sergei was one of those that researched it. They happened to be using some cameras to study the Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis in a joint effort throughout the world called the All-Sky Cameras. And they checked on those because they literally look at the whole of the sky, and because they had the times, they thought, well, let's see what was up there. Was there anything we saw? And in fact, they did. They saw the jellyfish. But they didn't see it where the people of the towns seen it. It was hundreds of kilometres further away. And when they actually did some work on this, what they found was it was dark over the town, but a rocket, a Soviet Cosmos, and you could even give the numbers and everything of the flight path, had been launched, and it was dust and particles from the rocket had kind of exploded over a large area. It was huge, the area that it was covering, and the perspective, when you look down, it made it look like it was over the town. Now, it's a massive distance away compared with what the people are reporting, because it's very difficult to judge size and scale unless you've got a physical object to judge it against. Same with the moon. I mean, if you look at the moon and you try and work out how big it would be if you were to draw it on the ground, and then you hold a 1 piece up or a 2 piece and try and cover it, you see the real size that you're looking at. We're very easily fooled by things like that. This case was great. They went into all the details, showed all the footage, and what happens is the rockets are so high up, the sun can still shine on the particles from them, even though it's darkness below. So you have this beautiful lighting effect. And there's been another instance of that. And in fact, they then showed a whole collection of slides of lovely, famous UFO cases above Russia, which were exactly this: rocket trials.
Oh, what a killjoy you are, Philip! What a killjoy!
God, don't you hate scientists?
Yeah, UFOs. That's the debate this hour.
It was only a reflection.
The question I'm asking is, how do we explain the inexplicable? Cheers, Philip.
Thanks.
We're with Philip Walton, who's director of the British Unidentified Flying Objects Research Association, BUFORA. And Philip's also a member of the Association for the Scientific Studies of Anomalous Phenomena. And next to Philip is Jeremy Barracks, Britain's top lie detector. National UFO Conference finished yesterday in Sheffield. A galaxy of experts examined the evidence, and they delivered the results of years of research into the physical nature of what they call anomalous phenomena. Matters like UFOs and creatures of outer space. With us in the studio is Philip Walton, director of the British Unidentified Flying Objects Research Association. He's also a member of the Association for Scientific Studies of Anomalous Phenomena, and Jeremy Barracks with us too, the lie detector. 0345 1053 89 is the number to call. Rachel Billman, well, you tell us your story, Rachel.
I was 24 when I woke up with a hole in my navel, and I was married to an American serviceman at the time, and I went to the hospital because when I woke up, there was some stuff oozing out my navel, and all my organs, when you pressed them, felt like rock. Well, I went up to doctors, and they said to me that they thought I had some sort of surgical operation. And I insisted to them, at that time, the only operation I had was a tonsillectomy and had my adenoids removed. But they still insisted that I had some sort of operation. But the incident when I was 12 was the one that set me on my journey, basically, to find out what had happened to me, because...
Sorry, Rachel, how old were you when this happened? You were 24?
About 24, yes.
Right, now you're 12?
Well, that was the one at 12 was the incident that set me on my journey to find out what happened, because at 24 I never even suspected that itself was an abduction. I just knew something unusual had happened, because the doctors kept insisting that I had some sort of operation, but it never occurred to me that I could have been an abductee.
Right.
But I had an incident at 12 where I had about 3 hours missing, and that I was consciously aware of seeing something in the sky and consciously aware of missing time. But from the time I left my friend's house to the time I got home, there was, like I said, about 3 hours, because I left my friend's house about 6:25, and I was in close to 10 o'clock. The news had just finished, and it was still on when I got in, which totally confused me. But to my way of thinking, no time had elapsed at all. As far as I was concerned, I wasn't late. I thought I was still 6:30. It didn't seem like there was any time missing whatsoever. But it wasn't until my dad, like fathers do when they tell the children to be home by a certain time. He thought I'd gone off to a friend's house. I said, no, I hadn't. And, which completely confused me, because I'd been brought up to tell the truth. It just, that night just totally, utterly confused me. I didn't know what was going on. I knew what I had seen. I knew what time I'd left my friends, and I knew it was not a 3-hour walk from my friend's house to my parents' house. It was only a matter of a couple minutes.
Rachel, were you frightened at that point? When you were 12?
When I first saw the object, yes, I was terrified, because because I had been brought up, because my dad was in the American military. He had brought me up basically not to believe in such things, that such things were nonsense. And no one really totally prepared me for what I had seen that night, because it was beyond words. I haven't really... The thing that I saw that night at 12, I haven't seen since. It was totally, it was indescribable.
Okay, the other thing is the puncture in your navel.
Yes, that occurred later.
Was that painful? That was when you were 24?
Yes, that was painful, because what happened was I had woke up, and I had noticed this hole in my navel, because it had some ooze draining out of it, and it was like traces of blood behind it, and my organs, like I said, were all hard, and, you know, like when I touched them, it felt like they were rock, and it hurt.
Your internal, your...
Yes.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening, because like I said, the doctors kept insisting I had some sort of operation. I kept insisting I hadn't. Well, in the finish, they ended up treating me for an infection, because that's basically all. They just gave me some antibiotics. But I know they were talking amongst themselves about it. But I remember telling them that I had not had an operation.
Yes, I know the lady that I tested, that I met with the puncture, the initial reaction of the doctors was that she'd been sexually molested by a man, and she was able to show quite categorically that...
They didn't explore me that far.
Well, she was able to prove that she had been locked into her home. Her partner was away. She was locked into the home. There was no sign of any forcible entry or anything else. She was just in this state the next morning.
Yeah, that's basically the way it was for me. I just woke up, you know, the night before I was all right. Next morning I woke up and I have this infection and this stuff coming out of my navel and not knowing where it came from. It totally baffled me. I was totally puzzled by it.
What's the story, Rachel?
Well, what the story behind that...
No. What do you think?
Well, from having the hypnotic regression, I now know that it was an abduction experience. But at that time, I wasn't aware that it was an abduction experience. I remember the night before seeing a bright light outside the bedroom window, thinking it was the moon or a light, but not being able to see the source of the light. But I remember it was really bright, and it was really white, and it seemed to light up all the area out the back.
Rachel, where did you have the, who did the hypnotic regression? Was that done in England or America?
Yes, that was done here in England.
Right.
Because I'm British, I did live in America for a time. That's where the abductions took place.
Right. I mean, we've just reinstated our 5-year ban again on using hypnosis. The reason for that is we tend to find that we've actually done some tests with people who've been willing subjects and fed them stories, then regressed them through hypnosis and watched how the stories evolve, and compared the truth as we know it, because we wrote it down and told them it, with what we get out at the end. And they don't bear an awful lot of resemblance, the actual original story, with what is then brought out in the hypnotic regression. And what we tend to find is that people bring a lot from their subconscious through as well, things that they've seen on telly, things that they've experienced in other situations. So the thing is, you're saying that before the hypnotic regression you didn't think you'd been abducted, and after
No, I knew I saw something at 12. Something not man-made.
And you lost time.
And I lost 3 hours time. That, I can say, hand on heart. I mean, because I carried that trauma with me for 17 years.
That's precisely what I was going to ask you, Rachel. Are you still suffering from trauma?
Well, it's not so much the trauma of the experience itself, it's the trauma of having to fight to be believed in, because people look at me as if I've sort of jumped off a cliff somewhere. And,
that's a very common... all the people that I have tested have all had one thing in common, that they didn't want to say what had really happened, because they felt that people would laugh at them.
You do get laughed at, and people look at you with this sort of...
So you're an alien.
Like
amusement.
Yeah, that's it, basically. That what I've experienced is nothing but a mere practical joke, that I'm sort of either made it all up, or that, you know, and honestly, I'm a Christian. I have things I prefer to do with my time, rather than make up bizarre stories. I
think people who investigate this sort of thing would say that you definitely haven't made something up. You've experienced something. It's the interpretation of what the experience is, to try and find the facts behind it. Now, it could be exactly what you say. It might be that if you're involved in a car crash or something like that, your experience of what you felt happened and what actually happened sometimes differs as well, because the trauma itself can make you remember certain things and not others. Now, I know in BUFORA we actually have a witness support group where witnesses can get together, witnesses that have seen and experienced abduction, and they can talk and be amongst people who have witnessed these things as well. In America there's a lot more cases of this. You're almost felt to be odd if you haven't had an experience. So it's different in this country, but I mean, if you are interested, you can get in touch with BUFORA. I'm sure we can put you in touch with the witness support group, people who, like yourself, have an experience.
Rachel, thank you. We've got a lot of calls to get through, and we'll give out a number. Have you got a contact number, Philip? We can give out later.
If you want to.
Yeah, we'll give that out at the end of the program. Let's go to Devon and speak to Adam. You're on Talk Radio UK, Adam.
Morning, Scott.
Hi.
Philip and Jeremy.
Morning.
Hi. I was at the BUFORA conference at the weekend, and obviously was privileged to see the Roswell footage.
Right. Let's just remind people this film supposedly shot in 1947 after the crash of a strange craft near an Air Force base called Roswell.
That's right. In fact, I believe that, according to different reports, that there may even have been a mid-air collision between two craft, and that the artifacts were spread across quite a wide scale. Is that correct, Philip?
No, well...
Depending on the viewpoint, of course.
Yeah, we had at the conference another person coming up saying that there were actually two crashes, one at White Sands, or near White Sands, and one at Roswell, and was saying that the film footage was actually from the White Sands. There were two cases within 4 months of each other of crash retrievals or crashes of alien craft reported in the area, and they seem to be getting confused over the years, and more stories seem to be coming out. I must say that according to the information I've got, the original crash at Roswell didn't have aliens. There was a craft that came down and scattered material. The aliens seemed to come out later, and as the story's gone on and it's developed, more and more information has come to light, or the story's expanded, and now we have a second crash near White Sands. The confusion between the two, it's very difficult now to get back to the truth. There definitely something happened at Roswell. We know that something happened at Roswell. The military say that something happened at Roswell. What it is, it's so difficult to tell.
Sure. As far as I'm concerned, I think that whether the crash happened or didn't happen is academic. It's almost a matter of that it happened. There is so much written evidence and so many testimonials.
Well, the military themselves admit that something happened. Right. I mean, we've had stories of weather balloons. We've had stories of foreign craft coming down, and the area being sealed for that.
There's also, of course, the family testimony of the soldier, the stationed at the base, who spent his latter years in Britain, who recalled the story to his family and took it to his deathbed, and they relate that he actually saw an alien in the back of one of the trucks that he was guarding, and the description of the alien, or the entity, I should say, the body, was very similar to the film footage that we saw.
There were differences. The original witnesses seem to be saying 4 to 5 fingers and toes. The film footage definitely was 6 digits.
That's right.
So you've got a discrepancy there.
What's the finger between friends?
Well, Adam,
I'll
tell you who's on the line is Ray Santilli, and Ray owns the rights to that film from Roswell. So let's talk to Ray. Ray, can you just tell us briefly how you managed to get your hands on the film?
Yeah, hi, firstly. I was working in America about 3 years ago on a music documentary, and I came across a cameraman that in the mid-50s was working for Universal News as a freelance, and we booked some footage from him for the music documentary, and he was just he seemed like a regular guy, and he was we built up a good relationship, and towards the end of that he said, oh, by the way, would you be interested, and started talking about, prior to 52 when he was working for the Army Air Force. And he explained that he was a cameraman, and that in 47 he was sent down to what was an aviation crash site.
Now, I've seen some shocking things written about you, Ray.
Yeah, I've seen them as well.
Ranging from all sorts of things, from a spiv to, a con man and all the rest. You don't sound that way to me, I have to say.
Well, thank you very much, but you see, the problem is that it's very, very hard to knock the footage, because the footage is what it is. And, as we talk here today, there isn't a shred of evidence to say that the film is a hoax. In fact, quite the opposite. The evidence is building to say that the film is real. So if you want to knock the footage, the only way you can knock the footage is really by looking at maybe myself and my company.
Right.
And I accept that people have to do that.
Now, what about Ray? I also read that at one stage there were figures burnt into the film, and another version of figures weren't.
That's all nonsense. You're talking about the Sunday Times article.
Yes.
What had happened was that before the broadcasters were involved in the film, we were at the time going to produce our own documentary on the subject, and we had logged each of the reels ourselves, in much the same way as you would a time code, because what we'd done was that there's information on the canisters which we felt maybe was relevant, and we had superimposed that over certain sections of the film. But all it is login information.
And let's just remind me, the film shows what?
It's the viewable footage is a full autopsy, and there's debris footage as well, and then from there on the quality deteriorates.
Just a second, Ray. We're going to call Jazz in London. Jazz, good morning. You're on Talk Radio UK.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
What's your story, Jazz?
I had an encounter when I was about 14 years old. I was visiting an old people's home at the time, doing some community work with a friend.
Jazz, can we talk about that in just a moment?
Yeah.
Let's talk about your knowledge of Roswell first.
Yeah, certainly. My background as a result of the encounter that I mentioned is that I went to study astrophysics at university and a number of other disciplines, and the Roswell incident and the various bits of information that have come out of it suggest that the metals that were recovered from the crash site, supposedly linked in with the spacecraft technology itself, were metals that were also being investigated by the US government just after the Second World War, when they were trying to produce technologies to make ships invisible to radar.
Right. So you believe what?
There's two possibilities. One, that the technologies that people were talking about were already being developed by the US government, and two, that the technologies were further developed after the crash in 1947.
So do you feel it was an experimental USAF aircraft that crashed rather than an alien? And the hush-up was for security purposes?
It's both, actually. I think they were originally working on that particular material, and then by chance they happened to come across a lovely little UFO crash which enabled them to actually develop that technology further. And I think personally, from my studies in aeronautics and astronautics, that they've actually been using it to develop stealth-borne technologies, which I know personally have been available since the 1970s, although just
But you do believe that the Roswell crash was an extraterrestrial vehicle of some kind?
There's been too many witnesses, and my own research personally suggests that that is definitely the case.
So, right. Now, so you think that Ray Santilli's film could well be genuine?
Now, this is questionable because I'm familiar with the film itself. I've downloaded pictures off the internet that show the aliens and some of the deformities, I think, which are associated with the hands. And the hands from classical anatomical pictures suggest that they are, in fact, deformities of an ordinary human being. Whereas the aliens which are pictured in the film, for me, they could be either somebody who's been genetically mutated, or either through some kind of radiation treatment, or perhaps through a birth defect. If they are indeed aliens, then I think that the images that have actually been taken should be taken seriously, because they do seem to resemble many features which are associated with aliens which are linked up to that particular incident.
Right. Now, you're an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
And you got into that game because at 12, what happened?
I was with a friend, and said I went to community centre to help out the old age people, and while we were down there, we were waiting outside the warden's house, and an X-shaped object flew overhead. It was about 50-60 feet, just above the tree line, and going very slowly, about, 5-6 miles an hour, absolutely silent, not a sound coming out of it. And we went home to his home afterwards, my friend's home, and we sat down, we were wondering what the hell it was that we saw. I spent the next week drawing pictures of it, trying to understand what it could possibly be, and it encouraged me basically to get involved in astronautics and aeronautical design, and look into the possibilities of what it could be. But to this very day, all the planes I've seen, all the aeronautical material I've seen that the various governments around the world have produced, suggest that whatever I saw, it wasn't of this Earth.
So, you not just have an open mind as a scientist, you actually tend towards the belief that we are being visited.
I think there's plenty of belief in that for me, because lately one of the things I've been involved in is looking into propulsion technologies for various kinds of spacecraft, and these technologies basically use shifts in gravitational fields to enable a craft to literally open up a hole in space and time and travel from one region in space and time to another. I mean, this technology was originally being developed by the US government just after the Second World War, in an experiment known as the Philadelphia experiment.
Thanks for that, Jazz. Back to you, Ray.
Hi.
Jazz seems to think that your film might indeed be genuine. There is, I mean, he hasn't, here we have an astrophysicist who hasn't written it off.
Well, I mean, firstly, it is a difficult subject, and we're waiting until the 28th of this month before we know the determination by the various broadcasters. But as far as the cameraman is concerned, he can't tell you where the creatures came from. He can't tell you where the vehicle came from. When he was sent down there, he was told it was a Russian spy plane that had crashed. When they all got there, they obviously knew that it wasn't. But what the creature is a mystery to everyone at the moment.
Ray, it's Phil here. I've seen the film when you showed it to the directors of BUFORA, and also at the conference.
Yeah.
I just want to say first, in the actual UFO groups, I don't think anyone's actually having a go at you at all. You come over as a really nice guy. The main argument is some people believe the Roswell incident, some people don't, and it's trying to put the film into context with that. That's their main arguments. I must admit I'm sceptical on the whole issue of the film being genuine because of the inconsistencies with reports in the past, and I think the first criteria has got to be testing the film, obviously, to try and ascertain the age. Is the test going to be definitely done for the 28th?
The tests have already been done. We had a fax this weekend, actually, from the States to say that they've given us a 95% probability now that the film is 1947.
Right.
They've actually determined that the film stock is something called Cine Kodak Super XX, which was discontinued in 1956. And they can determine from the attributes of the film itself that it was shot within 2 years of manufacture. And it's obviously a very important piece of news for us. And that's unfortunately too late for the Channel 4 program, but that's what we got in this weekend.
Because there were offers from Kodak.
We did Kodak at the very beginning, just in terms of the codes, but this new report is from a more detailed examination. We've also given the film to NASA, who have been refocusing images, looking at reflective surfaces to see what's been going on behind the camera. And from everything that I hear, the footage and the film that goes out in America on the 28th is a very, very positive look at the event and our footage.
Right.
Ray, physically, how much film is there? I mean, is it a huge big canister of film?
Well, yeah, I mean, we took 22 reels of film from the cameraman, but we only had...
What was he doing with the film?
Well, each reel of film is about 3 minutes in duration, and during the event itself, he shot hundreds of canisters of film. What he did was he separated problem canisters, either exposure problems or where the film had jammed or focus problems or whatever. He'd sent the first batch back to Washington and retained the second batch just to work on in development. And it was a coincidence, really, because at that time, or just after that time, the Army and the Air Force split into two different divisions. The Army went one way and the Air Force went in a different direction. And he just simply called Washington on a continual basis to say, come and pick up this second batch of film. It's part of the first job. And he was being passed around from pillar to post, and in the end, he just gave up. He gave up hounding them on a weekly basis to pick up the film, and he just stuck it in his archive. That's how he kept it.
How much of the rest of the film, now, you say that we've got so many minutes that we've managed to see at the conference and that, the rest of the film isn't of good quality. Is there some of the rest of the film, of the autopsies and some of the materials, quality enough to actually see something? I know there's a difference between the broadcasting.
The problem that we have is that we get jumped on from a very high height if somebody comes to us and say we're using film that's not authenticated or it's a different film stock or whatever. So in order to play safe, with the initial screenings here on the 28th, we've used only what we know to be completely verified and also good viewable quality. After that, the grayer areas of the film materials that we have can then be analysed.
Right, so we should be able to see more footage that's of the poorer quality later.
Yeah, and technology changes on a almost weekly basis, and there could be the technology that available where we can retrieve the image from the negative stock and so forth.
Ray, you're sitting on probably the most sensational images ever taken.
I think so.
Where's the original, pal?
The original? We have, well, the originals...
I hope it's in a big vault somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say. Switzerland in a safe, and that's about it, really. Some went back to the cameraman, and some are still with us.
Listen, I believe you, Ray. There's no chance of getting a piece of the action, is there?
There isn't any action.
We can handle the publicity for you, Ray. I'm in partnership with
Jeremy,
Scott here.
no, you're not, pal. Ray, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.
I'd like to talk to you again soon. Ray Santilli, who owns the rights to film supposedly shot in 1947 after a mysterious crash of a strange craft near the Roswell Air Force Base in New Mexico, and the black and white footage supposedly shows humans in white radiation suits performing an autopsy on aliens. It was finished yesterday in Sheffield. A galaxy of experts examined the evidence. They delivered the results of a year's research into the physical nature of what they call anomalous phenomena. Matters like UFOs and creatures of outer space. With us in the studio is Jeremy Barracks, the lie detector, and Phil Walton, who's director of the British Unidentified Flying Objects Research Association, BUFORA. And we'll remind me to give out the number, Phil. Let's go to Harrogate. Tony is there. Tony, good morning. Good afternoon. You're on Talk Radio UK.
Good afternoon, Scott.
Hello, Tony.
Hi, and good afternoon to your guest. Yes, I was stationed in Cyprus in 1966. The base was RAF Episcopi, and I worked at a place called the Near East Operations Centre, which was about a mile away from the main base. In actuality, it was just a collection of Nissen huts and what have you. Anyway, I went into work this particular day. It was a sort of bright summer's day, not a cloud in the sky, and I'd probably been only sat down for about half an hour, and I heard everybody rushing outside and a bit of a commotion going on, and I joined them, and everybody was looking up in the sky at this what I can only describe as a very bright sphere, but it was very, very high up in the sky. It wasn't a star or anything like that. It was too large for a star. Anyway, the duty operations officer, he contacted the main base, which was Akrotiri, which was about 15-20 miles away. And obviously they were concerned, so much so that they scrambled a Lightning fighter aircraft to go and investigate. So this was off and away in about 7 minutes, and we could actually see it from where we were. We saw it shoot up in the sky. And he reached his ceiling height, which I think, I'm not quite sure of this, was about 90,000 feet. And by this time they'd actually patched the RT communications from the aircraft to the control tower through to us, and we were listening on a loudspeaker. And when he got to his ceiling, they said, well, what size... before they said that, he said the object looked no nearer to him at that height than when he was on the ground. So I said, well, what size do you estimate the object to be? And he said, in his estimation, it was the size of a 300,000-ton ship. Sorry, no, not 300, a 3,000-ton ship. So he could do no more, so he came back down. And this object just remained in the same position, and I think they took some kind of fix from the basis to see if it was moving at all. Everybody was thinking, well, is it a weather balloon, is it this and that? And it remained in the same position for about 4 to 4.5 hours. Then it drifted, it didn't make any sudden movements and darting all over the sky, it just drifted away. And the next report we got was from Wheelis, US Air Force Base, which was then in the Americans, and we had bases then in Libya. And I saw the actual signal for that we had our own communication center. And over the next 24 hours, we kept getting reports from various US Air Force bases of the same object hovering over them. And the last sighting was at the US Air Force Base at Rota in Spain. And then it just disappeared. Nobody's ever been able to come up with any explanation at all for it.
Did they manage to get radar fix on it at all?
I've no idea. The only information that we got was this phone patch through to us, you know. But we got no feedback.
Tony, when was this? What year?
1966.
Well, how come you didn't know about this one?
There's lots of events that come in.
No one had a camera, did they, Tony?
No. I mean, nobody had a camera at work. I don't know how many people witnessed it over at Akatiri. Certainly nobody at the main base at Episcopi seemed to have seen it at all.
What do you think, Tony?
I've just got no idea. When people say UFO, to me that is exactly what it is, just an unidentified flying object. Obviously people were coming up with their own ideas, and obviously people were mentioning extraterrestrials and all this sort of thing.
It's difficult to get the information because of the time. You're talking the 60s, Cold War. They're getting a lot more helpful now. The Russians were saying that they had difficulty when they were trying to find out the rocket trajectories for this thing with the rocket dust. But they're opening up more and more, and the information is being shared. So in 66, 67, useless to try and get any information from the military or from the government.
Even our own military?
Oh, yeah. But nowadays...
Do you think there's a cover-up?
No, well, cover-up in that some information isn't given out, but it might be for sensible reasons.
You don't want to scare the natives?
No. There's a lot of testing of equipment over the Arctic and Antarctic, which sometimes strays into airspace, and people see it and then ask for, what was that? And when we ask the MOD and that, sometimes they'll tell us whether there was something there or not. Sometimes they just can't say because it's other people's equipment. The example is, I think last year, just before April Fool's, a year before last, an American plane straying into Irish airspace, and they announced it pretty soon after it happened, that they picked up this UFO, etc. But it turned out to be an American plane, but a rather secret one. They didn't really want that information given away. I mean, you can't test secret planes anywhere except for the Arctic and Antarctic, and occasionally they zoom over here. So there's reasons why they don't say. Certain governments, I must admit, in the EEC are much more helpful, and Scandinavian governments seem to cooperate very well with their UFO researchers, much more open to the information, and it solves a lot more problems.
Let's go to Luton. I want to squeeze in this Peter's call. Peter, good morning, good afternoon. You're on Talk Radio UK. What's your story, Peter?
Good afternoon, Scott. Right. I've had many a UFO sighting since an early age, since I was about 5 years old. I'm now 38, and they still continue. I've seen a being, I'm not going to say much more than that, but a being which didn't resemble any type of humanoid or human being in any way whatsoever, apart from the fact that it had two hands. That's the only thing. I've also seen a huge, and I mean a huge, object in the sky. Massive, so big it would make a jumbo jet look like a dinky toy. But besides all this, there's a couple of other things I would like to talk about, and I understand Ray's gone now.
Yes.
But I have two newspaper cuttings in front of me. One was the Sun newspaper taken on July the 28th, and the other one was the People on July the 16th. Now, these are obviously two different pictures of the same type of being. But on one being, the right leg has got an identical injury, if you like, to the other one, who has the identical injury on the left leg.
Right.
Now, if it's not something to do with the autopsy, it's a bit suspicious, I must admit.
No, I tell you what happens regularly in newspapers. They actually
as well.
They reverse the photograph.
Yeah, they actually did it on at the conference. Someone put a slide up the wrong way around, and they went, it's on the other leg, and they said, nope, slide's the wrong way around.
Yeah, that's true. Having worked on newspapers, that's true. Peter, thanks. I wanted to talk to, very quickly, Dr. Ian Morrison, who's a radio astronomer. Ian, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, sorry, we haven't got long to talk, Ian.
No
you
problem.
took part in SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Can you sum up for us what you found?
Well, so far nothing, I'm afraid. And in fact, NASA, unfortunately, were unable to continue funding of the SETI project themselves. It was hoped to run for around 10 years, starting about a year and a half ago. But they very kindly let a private institute take over all the very expensive equipment, which includes some fantastic radio receivers, and the project continues. It's now called Project Phoenix. It's using a telescope at Parkes in Australia and a telescope in America. So they've now got about a year's observations under their belt, but I have to say that so far nothing really exciting has been picked up.
But the search goes on.
It does.
Ian, many thanks. We must talk again soon. Dr. Ian Morrison, the radio astronomer. Phil, we've only got 30 seconds, and Jeremy, the search does go on, and you have an open mind.
Oh yes, I mean, we're putting, the conference has been financially very successful for us, and all of that money is going into investigation and research. We're building equipment, we're trying to get positive information
Give us the number, Phil.
Right, we've got a couple of numbers. You can do me on 0181 313 1556.
Yeah.
That should be okay for this evening. And then on, we've got a central office, but I'd rather give the address so we get things in writing for that. That's 1 Woodhall Drive, Backley, West Yorkshire, and that's WF177SW. People can contact me on 22 West Street, Bromley. That's BR11RF.
Right, they can. We'll leave this with the switchboard. Jeremy, and the people who've seen it are telling the truth.
They are telling the truth.
Thanks, you two. I'm Scott Chisholm. This is UK Today. See you tomorrow.